Hello, and welcome to the Sam Dever Podcast, episode 45. In this episode, I speak with entrepreneur Jim Nico. Now, I got to say right off the bat, if it wasn't for this man, Jim Nico, there would not even be a Sam Dever Podcast. I worked with Jim almost a decade ago over in Las Vegas on one of his projects, which was the Social Network Show, which exposed me to interviewing, media, learning how to film interviews. It all started with him there, and it was a true treat to reconnect with Jim on this podcast. It was a wonderful conversation. He's highly intelligent, super entertaining, and I had a blast. And honestly, I can't wait to have him on again because it was such a great conversation. The book of the episode, I'm going to go with The Dip by Seth Godin. I read this one. It's been a couple years since I read it. I probably need to reread it, but basically it's the concept of when you should either keep going with something or break it off and go do something else, which is really a really tough concept, especially as an artist or something you're passionate about. He really breaks down, when to call it quits and when to keep going. So it's just one of those good perspectives. Again, and Seth Godin's written so many really good marketing books. This is another good one of his. It's called The Dip, and it's by Seth Godin. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Jim.
Oh my. Okay. Here we go.
Jim Nico, welcome to the Sam Dever Podcast.
Thanks, man. It's been years, here we are.
I told a couple people on the phone because it really started to sink in that you and I were doing this. And I told them, I just started thinking about it. I go, if it wasn't for Jim, I wouldn't be doing any of this. Okay. I never would have been on this media journey that I've been on over the almost decade now. That all started with you.
Thanks, man.
So
well, that's interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, those were such amazing days. I mean, there was so much sparkle in them because here we were, like UNLV, and it was fun, man, and it was really meaningful those days. But I'm so glad to hear that about you because I just think you're amazing at it, and I want to help if I can. If we move on and we don't tick each other off too bad during the. I like to try to get you out more. I mean, I like to promote others. I don't like promoting me. So,
Yeah, no, and that's always one thing I learned from you and picked up from you early on. You were all about promoting other people. And you were, really to take everyone back, you are the founder of the Social Network Show.
Yeah.
Like you were doing something no one else was doing at that time, and bringing on guests, doing that show at UNLV, it really was ahead of its time. It really was, especially when you see what everyone's doing now. It's like, well, Jim was doing this almost a decade ago.
I know, man. I know. And I think the irony is, I think it's still the content wise. I think it's still ahead of its time. I mean, if I may just take off on that for a second. I mean, people could say, well, why? What? Well, I think one of the reasons was that we weren't afraid to look social networking and social media in the eye, so to speak. And I'm not saying that there isn't some good that's come out of it, but the idea that that you can go on some kind of a network like Facebook, I guess it's Meta now. I don't pay too much attention, but and just like hook up with people. I mean, I'm just going to cut to the chase. I think the one thing that really bothered me about Facebook in the beginning was, other than I'm not saying it hasn't done some good, but was that I thought that they turned the word friendship upside down. I mean, in other words, just my opinion here. In other words, you don't become a friend by clicking on some kind of a social network site. Those weren't friends. That's not how you define friendship. I thought the bar got lowered so far, and I know why. I mean, sure, the money and the commercial reasons, and but it didn't change the fact that, to me, you couldn't know if those people were friends. So that's where kind of it began. And then we saw some of the damage that was done, some of the like Carol Todd when she lost her daughter, you know what I mean? And then we had so many meaningful people come on the show. And one of our questions was always like, well, how do you use social networks? What do you think? You know, of course, you know the history, but yeah, man, it was, and I just, what I had hoped for that era was that these, I hate the word man up, but I still wish that the social networks would stand up, and they'd stood up and been counted, but if they'd stand up and say, look, you know, we are media companies. We need to be responsible for what we say. You know, I mean, and that's why we're still ahead, because we're advocating for that, but I haven't seen it happen, you know?
Yeah, it's, it's funny because, what you were doing, then that helped birth me to do the social media show. And I felt like we were both promoting this social media, social networks all over the place. And now I was actually talking to someone I had worked with on the show, and it's like the social media show. And it's like, man, I almost feel like I was peddling crack back then. like thinking it was good for people. But now that we're getting more and more years into it, I don't know how great it is for people, especially now. And that's interesting what you say about the friendship in the beginning, how you caught that really early on.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you look what's happened with it, it's really taken over people's minds and lives. Now everything's on this phones. People are buried in it. They're lost in it. And really, it is awesome because we're getting to do what we're doing right now. And that's a great connection. But it's also kind of a false sense of a connection in a way with a lot of people too. So I don't know where I'm going with any of that. But
it's all right, man. But you know, that's just it. I mean, you're just kind of going with your gut. I mean, and you're right. I mean, that's what, so we're not saying it hasn't done any good, but when you take things, well, anyway, so that was then. I think we did almost 210 shows. Dr. J was, of course, one of the things so if anyone is interested in this show and they're interested in any of my background, I mean, what I was trying to do, and then we can cap this or whatever, but in a nutshell, what I was doing is I was trying to bring up how we could make the whole social networking and social media experience more fair and ethical and even more legal and, moral. I don't know that we succeeded, but we certainly brought a lot of amazing voices to that conversation. We recorded the social network show, recorded approximately 210 shows or something, and I also got into producing those series on the social network station. Now those are kind of gone. I think the domains are up for sale. But anyway, and last thing to cap this off was what I wanted to do was not just go on and be my normal charming self, just kidding, self, but I wanted, when I met Dr. J, that was a real turning point, because I haven't heard of many experimental psychologists. I mean, and that's what she is, and she still is. She's still a really close friend, and she's retired now. But to bring on somebody with that I had a clinical background. I was a crisis intervention expert, but to bring in the psychological level of her made it rich, and you came on and then it gave birth to what we were doing, you and and I thought we were kind of two peas in a pod. I don't know. Anyway, that's the cap. If anyone wants to know about it, my LinkedIn page has pretty much all, not everyone, but a lot of the guests that came on the show. And we had world class. I mean, it's funny because nowadays I see like, this is a conclusion, but nowadays, like I belong to Harrow, help a reporter out, and I don't know if you're into that, but do you know about that?
I haven't heard. I think I've heard the name. I don't know much about it.
Oh, it's very interesting. Very interesting. I'll turn you onto it later a little bit more. But what I'm getting at is people intermittently over the 5 or 6 years that we did the social network show, people would say, well, how do you get guests? And like, we had waiting lists. I mean, people just came out of the woodwork. Everyone wanted to be on the show. We got Google on the show. I mean, and that wasn't easy, but we had, the United Nations, Johnson & Johnson, all kinds of, great, interesting people. So we can cap that off. We stopped that, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, we stopped producing and doing the show, but if anyone's interested, I think the one place that they might really like to see it, if anyone's getting into podcasting, in addition to listening to your show, they might go to my LinkedIn page and look at the guests we have, and so that's that,
Yeah, I'll for sure put your links in the description of this episode so people can click and go check it out. Another thing I'll add, to that experience, at least from my standpoint, I mean, especially now that I look back at it, man, I got to be in the room with some amazing individuals for some incredible conversations.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I think I was 26 at the time, something like that.
Yeah.
25 even.
You were lit. Yeah, you were on the move, man. But great times. I mean, and I still think, and not just me, I think we were ahead of our time. And I think that was part of the problem because, I mean, come on, the social networks were making a fortune. They weren't necessarily going to change because I said they needed to, but that was then. So that, again, people, if they look at my LinkedIn profile, they can see all the guests, and we did different, I produced different series, as you know, on the social network station. So it was a blast. But I think it was more meaningful than a blast,
I didn't call you the Ted Turner of social networking for nothing. So,
well, that was the best compliment ever, It really was, because of all the guys out there, I don't know that much about Turner, but I was intrigued by him to the extent that I very much respected, if I got it right, is that at one point he gave away a third of his wealth to the United Nations, which I haven't heard of anyone else do it. I mean, I'm not saying no one has, but it hasn't been front page news. Like I'm guessing if Gates would give away a third of his, you know what I mean? How much money do you need? I mean, you and I know how much money we're going to try to go get. But at one point, I got to tell you, in the middle of that whole social networking and social media jaunt that we did, I did something that I didn't tell a lot of people about. I bought a domain that said, this was the exact domain, I think it was classic, greedismorethanyounneed.com. That's what it was. And I owned, I mean, my wife just about, I mean, I don't know how rocky it got, but I mean, at one point I owned so many damn domain names and I thought they were all brilliant. I mean, it's like.
I do the same thing.
Yeah, domain junkie. I had a problem. Anyway, but the one, greedismorethanyounneed.com. I don't know if it's around, but I got rid of it, but I loved it. And I still believe that, that greed is more than you need. You don't, you and I'm not going to preach on that. I'm not going to get it, but I got a lot of feedback on that. And then I started getting radicals were following that. And I thought, well, wait a minute, I better be careful because I'm doing this Main Street. Anyway, that was then. And I also had another domain, and I can defend this one, thesocialnetworkfromhell.com. So what the goal there was, I never did it. The goal was that once you've been on the other social networks, what you should do is join the social network from hell and settle down into your. Okay, so that was my domain addiction state. I got a million of them, but they're gone now.
Trust me, I've definitely let a few go that I've held on to for years. Because in your mind, you're like, oh, this is going to be huge.
Yeah.
I'm reminded just talking to you too. It's like you've always had this big creative entrepreneurial drive. Has that always been in you? Has that always been?
Well, I got it. Okay. First of all, I got to tell you a story. But I got to tell you, I mean, because this is the fun part. I got to tell you a quick story. But I'm also going to send to you the original because I don't want to read it now. But I'll give you, like, how people say you get things in your blood, right? That kind of thing. Okay. So my dad, this is where it started. Okay. So I was more interested in spiritual. My thing was I was interested in really high level knowledge in terms of like, whether it was the ultimate in poetic and literary knowledge or philosophical knowledge or mystical metaphysics. So I was always way into the ultimate stuff, right? My dad, his name was Vito Nico, which, so it's Italian, my last name. And he was a genius in his own right and unbidden. I mean, he never claimed to be that, but those around him, including me, saw it in him. I mean, he was just, you could see it. As soon as he walked in the room, you could see it. And there was a very dangerous side to this guy, okay, which I don't know that I want to get into that now. It had a major effect on my life, but you know me, I just might get into it in part two. Anyway, I don't mind going into it, but I want to be careful because that one, it was when you got an Italian, here's the combo: Italian, genius, and he was a Navy Ranger. So during his time, he was the most highly trained killer, assassin-like killer of his era. The Navy Rangers were way ahead of anyone else. Green Berets. These guys, they predated all that. Okay. So when you add in like an amazing a trained, very very sophisticated guy, his hands are registered. He couldn't fight. I saw him fight, but he wasn't allowed to legally. His hands are registered. Italian, genius, and hands registered. And then you got me, the rebel, and I'm the oldest son. And he thought I was exactly like him. I mean, from the very beginning. There were some reasons for that. One, we were the same size as I got older, And this all relates to your question, but it's the fun background to it. We were the same size. I wore his clothes when I was in high school. I later had we became quite close. She said, you have your dad's eyes, I mean, there were a lot. It was kind of eerie. He and I were more like twins than we were like father son, but then there was a dark side. Okay. So 2 stories about him ought to put things in focus. He made his first million on a borrowed $5 bill. Here's what he did, okay? He would go to a bar. He was a drinker, okay? He'd go to a bar, and this is a typical thing with him. Like in Michigan, I grew up in Lansing, Michigan, capital of Michigan. He went to a bar, and he did a lot of his business in bars drinking. Anyway, he's in a bar. He borrows $5 from some guy, and this guy was feast or famine. I mean, we lived in mansions, and he'd be broke the next day, and then he'd have millions. I mean, it was up and down, roller coaster. He borrowed $5. Here's what he did. He knew of land that was available, but that was extremely expensive, or in a sense, unavailable. It was there, but it wasn't for sale. Okay, farmers, generations of farmers had all this acreage in Michigan. And it wasn't for sale, but you get a farmer coming in with the overalls and he's got $1 million in the bank, and everybody's got a price, that whole thing. So here's what he did. This was the beginning of malls as we know them today, the malls, right? So these mall developers were looking for property all over the world. I don't know about the world, but at least in Michigan and probably the other states, to build these huge malls, okay? And he knew that, and he knew farmers had land. So what he'd do is here's how he made his first million. He went to a farmer, he said, look, you want to sell? No, I don't want to sell. Well, what price would you sell for? So he'd raise it. He just raised it and raised it until the guy said, man, you'll never get that amount for my farm. But my dad said, well, but if I do, I get anything over that. So, if a parcel might have been for like 5 million, if he gets $1 million over that, 6 million, so he was dealing with options is what he was doing. He bought the option from the farmer to sell his land. You didn't need a real estate license to do this back then. I don't know about now. He'd buy the option on the back of a napkin usually, or a placemat, whatever. He'd pen it out with a cross pen, and he'd get an option to sell the land, and he'd take whatever he could sell it over and above. So that's how he made his first, on a borrowed $5 bill. He bought it for $5 million, sold it for $6 million, boom, he's a millionaire. And it's okay, but this is another story, and this is the last one. This is the one I'm going to send you. I didn't even know this one. My daughter found this one, but okay. So there was a point where he owned a couple of. He became a millionaire, all self-made. He never finished school. He just did it by his wits. Anyway, at one point he owned a hotel in Fort Lauderdale. I went there once and got in enough trouble that I needed to leave. But then he owned one in Winter Garden, Florida, which happens to be just outside Disney World. Okay, so he bought this is a good one. He bought the Ramada Inn, which was the very closest one to Disney World before Disney World opened.
Oh.
So here's what happened. He goes, he owns it. Now, how the hell he got that together? He was wild, this guy. Okay. I don't know how he did it, but he owned it. Okay. But he couldn't rent the rooms because Disney World hadn't opened. Okay. So he researched somehow and found this Wall Street financier. What does he do? He hijacks his plane. This financier is on vacation somewhere in the world, and he's coming back to Tampa on a private jet or whatever. And my dad, I don't know how he did it, probably bribed the pilot or something, whatever. He rerouted the plane to Orlando, and without the guy's knowledge, So, I mean, that's what he did, okay? But he was charming enough and he was brilliant enough to where, so the story, and I'll get you the literal one because there's some good detail. But anyway, the story, it was in a Florida newspaper. My daughter found it and I was amazed. It's just like him, typical. But anyway, so the guy, it starts the last piece of the story. The guy's getting off the plane with his wife, and he had no idea why they're in frickin' Orlando, right? Never met my dad, didn't know what was going on. But he said, man, but the orange blossoms were great. I'd never smelled those. So, and this guy's filthy rich. Okay. And so my dad finally, Vito, whatever, he forgave, this guy forgave him for commandeering the plane and lent him like $4 to $5 million to keep afloat until the Disney World opened. So that's in my blood, right? I always liked the big deals, and yet I hated business in a way because it clashed with the greed is more than my ethics and my spiritual goals and aspirations have always been just above my, shall we say, enjoying the beauty of the opposite sex, and then above that was the metaphysics and the philosophy. So they were always competing with me. I had the entrepreneurial stuff in my blood, and I had a knack for it like my dad, but it was always at odds with my spiritual development. So was dating. I went into a monastery when I was 17 to try to study to be a priest. It was an experiment. I shocked everybody, but I said, I'm not, this isn't a done deal. I'm just going in to see if I'm into it, So that's where it all began. But then I got into music. Once I heard Jethro Tull play, I was into Dylan and a lot of rock stuff, but when I heard Jethro Tull play, I just fell in love with the flute, the way the guy played the flute. I saw him live. It was a concert called Goose Lake in Michigan. And I had taught myself, when I was in the monastery, I recorded, at 17 years old, I recorded, there were some wild people in the monastery. How am I doing? Am I doing pretty good? I'm off on it.
It's incredible.
Okay. Tangents
this is beyond anything I ever thought it could be. Keep talking.
We're just getting warmed up. Okay.
Oh, this is great.
I got to tell you a little bit. Okay. So imagine this now. Okay. My mom said, I am married and I've been married about 30 years, so I don't want to piss her off. She's not here, so I can't really tick her off now. And she probably won't listen to the show because she could, no, she won't listen because she saw us, you and I together before. We were the guys, we were doing our guy thing. They're not, you and me. But okay, so I go into this freaking monastery. Well, one more thing, just to spice up everything. My dad, he was also he did let me know this. He was the checker champion of the 5th Fleet in the Navy. So that analytical genius, that mathematical analytical genius that he had was very prevalent. How the hell do you become a freaking chess checker champion of the 5th Fleet? You got to be Fuck.
Side note, it sounds like your dad needs a movie made on him.
Yeah, I know. Okay. So here's what happened. So I'm dating the most beautiful women in my hometown schools. That was another thing I was into. I love beauty. I love physical beauty. And so that clashed with my spiritual aspirations. But here's one more little piece. Saves you from asking questions because this is more fun anyway. So, but cut me off, man. If I get out too far, just cut me off. But anyway,
no, this podcast is all about going deep and far, and this is great.
This is, you can't make this shit up. So
no, this is gold.
Okay, at one point, my dad had a friend. He introduced us to a guy named Father Bill. He was a regular parish priest, diocesan priest in Lansing, Michigan, and his name was Father Bill McKeown. Okay, Father Bill had some of the most amazing eyes I've ever seen. They glistened with a certain brilliance that I rarely see. Okay, I've seen it maybe once or twice in my lifetime. And my dad said, he's the only guy I know that's smarter than me. So that gives you some idea of Father Bill. I think he was the guy that actually was the interpreter when the Japanese surrendered. He was the guy there, like he spoke like 10 or 12, I don't know, 7, 12 languages, something. Georgetown valedictorian, brilliant guy. And what he did, the reason I went into try to be a priest was him, because what he did is he worked with the poor, but he had the Catholic Church subsidize what he was doing. That was his thing. And I thought, well, I want to work with the poor. And so I'll go and I'll try to do the same thing. Well, I didn't last in the priesthood. I lasted a couple of years, got in a lot of, not legal trouble, but let's just say collegiate trouble. But I recorded a song in there. I did Misty by Errol Garner, the old song. And I did Lonely by John Sebastian. And here's what I mean. You don't think you're going to get recording engineering experts in the monastery, but there they were, these two guys. And I played piano a little bit and harmonica. Once they heard me play the harmonica, they said, well, we want to record you. Just happened to be a recording studio at St. Meinrad in the monastery, one of the oldest in the country. I mean, all this weird kind of stuff like that was going on. So when I got out of there, I got into music. I taught myself the flute, sax, piano. My goal was to play Locomotive Breath as good as Ian Anderson did. And I guess I pulled it off. But the band was I was in my 20s, about your age when we met, but I took that flute seriously and sax and stuff. But the band was too drunk, too stoned. It was a bunch of my brothers and, a guy from the seminary. And we actually made it. We got offered a deal in this guy came to one. We never performed. We only performed in public a couple of times. We just wrote music. We had like kind of a little farmhouse, which we all we wrote music, we played music, but we didn't go out. And then we went out. I went out and I played Locomotive Breath. He heard that. He said, I can offer you a deal in New York, and it was going to be like something like $1,400 or $1,600 a week. Now, again, this is going back decades, but your age, we're in Florida now. My dad's multimillionaire. Between ticking him off, that was always a trip. And there's more to that I'll tell you privately. But anyway, we got the band to a point where we got offered a gig to go tour in New York, start there at $1,600 a week, which, back in the early 70, 1970.
That was good money.
A lot, and expenses all paid. And I told the band, I said, everybody quits drinking. I wasn't drinking that much. I mean, I've had my day, but, and I said, or I'm out of here. I said, I can't do this because these were siblings. I had 3 or 4 brothers in the freaking band, plus my best friend from the monastery. Anyway, long story short, they didn't sober up and I left. I had a great flute. I had a great sax, and I just left and moved back to Michigan. Anyway, that was that. Then I got into clinical. Well, I drove a cab for a while, got cab stories. Oh yeah, you're not going to escape those, Sam. They may not hit the air. I got some classic. I made I'll just wet your whistle for that. I made more money sitting in the cab than I ever made driving. I was the limo driver in the cab. And that was in Santa Cruz, which, that my daughter's still there. That place is a trip. That's a whole series of stories. Then from there, I went into the clinical world, and I never had a degree. I kind of like skipped that because I was always studying. I always knew more than, I don't mean this in an arrogant way, but I worked at it. I studied psychology and metaphysics and all that. So I did have a working knowledge beyond the bachelor's level had I, gotten that. And so I talked myself into a counseling position without a degree, which was no easy feat. But by the time the guy realized I didn't have the degree, it was too late. I was already hired, and did a clinical thing for a lot of years, and then I got into the entrepreneurial thing, and I started businesses. So that's my whole life story. But the stories of that's that.
Oh, we could do a whole podcast on each one of those segments that you just.
Oh, they're fun. Okay, all right. Since you begged me, I'll tell you one more story. But man, this is good. You're gonna like this. So now I make history here because I'm going to say something that no one has ever said, and probably and I'll be challenged on it. But anyway, me, I'm as radical as they come, and I've got some surprises for you personally. In over the years, things that I've studied. I caught on one of your shows with that one girl who she's very charming.
Kalila.
Yeah, I liked her.
I think you may have met her. Because she
came, I probably did.
Yeah. Her and I are great friends, and she's been
she's pretty classy.
she's amazing.
Okay,
brilliant author.
I'm listening to that show, and I'm again. We're going to call this the tangent. Off on the tangents with me. That's a good title, anyway. Okay, yeah, you this you'll probably appreciate. So, I'm at Saint Meinrad. I'm digressing, but this one just a story for our faithful fans. We're here to entertain, as you know. So I'm trying to entertain them anyway. So I'm 17. I'm at Saint Meinrad Monastery in southern Indiana. It's one of the oldest monasteries in the country. I think it was 1860, so it has an old feel to it. Some modernness, but anyway. So I immediately start getting into trouble because I didn't want to follow some of the rules. I didn't want to get up at 6 a.m. Those are the little things. But some of this I'll tell you personally, but I think you will appreciate this one. And I think our vast audience, our growing audience will appreciate. So I'm there, and I could care less about politics to this day. I know it's there, and I know it's doing what it's doing, but I don't, I have no real interest in it. So anyway, but a buddy of mine named Chuck White was into politics. And one day, a lot of stuff happened before this. One day he came up to me. I was more interested. I was majoring in philosophy. I was writing serious poetry at that time, publishing in their local paper. And I had anyway, that's a whole other thing. But Chuck White came up to me one day and he said, "Listen, I know you're not into politics." And I said, "No, I'm not. So why are we talking about it?" And I wasn't really sarcastic, but he said, "But I am, and I want you to, but here's something kind of different." He said, "So Bobby Kennedy won the Indiana primary." And I said, "Well, that's good to know. I didn't know because I wasn't really watching the news either." But I said, "Well, but I don't know why are we talking about it?" And he said, "Because in Oregon and California, the schools don't get out till later, like in early June or something. And he goes there next to the Oregon primary and then the California primary." And he said he needs people to go work for him there. So I've got a deal with the Kennedy organization where 21 seminarians are going to, all expenses paid, can fly out to Oregon, canvas for Kennedy, and then basically on to LA. And LA was to be blunt, it was where the women, the girl mecca of that, to me, LA had to be with the girls. Okay. I didn't have a problem with girls, but that just had a reputation. I thought, man, so I'm going to get a free ride to LA. I say, I know why you're telling me this now. Okay. So we fly to Oregon. Now, here's the important, that's not so important, but here's where I was, again, like the social network show and the station and the association and everything, all the eight different avenues of that. I was ahead of my time. Here's how. I didn't know this when I got there, but out of 400 freshman seminarians, almost like the majority of these guys had never dated, never drank, never smoked any weed. Okay. And I mean, those are basic things you got to get through. You know, I mean, even if you don't stick with any of them, you got to experience. Okay.
Yeah, you got to go through it to understand.
Right? Okay. So I saw ahead, literally in my mind's eye, I envisioned, I thought, wait a minute. You're going to, these 380 or so regular red-blooded American guys were in what they called, and I just heard of this, minor seminaries. What that meant was they were in high school seminaries. I'd never heard of it till then. I was in a college seminary, and theology was like graduate school where you get your, you go on and you get your degree in theology. I didn't even know there was such a thing as a minor seminary. They were in minor seminaries and they didn't allow them to date. I thought, well, this is where I was ahead of my time. I thought if they don't date and they don't drink and they don't mix these things, they're going to start doing crazy things in the future with, when they do get around females, young and old. I mean, I saw that. I said, wait a minute, you can't not date and then go counsel young girls or old girls or women about marriage problems like sex problems and not get in over your head. So my mission then became to teach anyone who was willing how to date. So this created some funny stuff. So there was a guy named, I'll just call him Bob, because I don't know, I don't want to get sued. But anyway, Bob and Joe. Now, I was a freshman. They were both juniors at St. Meinrad College, right? And Bob, I had this other kind of an odd talent. Now, no offense to you, no offense. I kind of hate rap music. I'm not saying every single one, but 99% I kind of hate it. But not to be hypocritical, I was the first rapper. Here's what I mean. I mentioned being able to write poetry. Well, I was very, very seriously into that. And I had an ability to rhyme on the move. Okay, so when I drank, I could be talking to you like right now, and I could rhyme I could start even now. I don't want to do it, but I could rhyme everything I say for the next 30 minutes. And it, easily, like sort of in a rap sense, right? Well, Bob, we'll call him Bob, was fascinated by that. But what he was more fascinated with is I was tutoring him in how to date. So we would go out, we drink. This is all in a freaking monastery. We go out, we go to a drive-in. In those days, you'd order hot dogs and root beers, and I'd say, okay, Bob, here's what you do: ask her out, ask the waitress out. We picked the prettiest one, and he'd strike out. He didn't know the first thing about it. And I'd say, okay, so now try it this way. So I would tell him what to say, and it always worked. Okay, so now, and he sort of idolized me, which it was to the chagrin and almost his buddy, his best friend Joe, was amazed at that. He was amused by it, but he was also kind of like, what do you make of that? I'm his best friend. He's idolizing this guy because I had this ability with women, and I was teaching him how to date. So what's that got to do with going out to Oregon? Because Bob and Joe went with us, right? So picture this. We blow out to Oregon. They gave us a car by Kennedy's. Kennedy's gave us a car. Knew nothing about politics. I mean, zero. Wasn't interested in it, but here I am. Met a model out there. I'll just call her Sandy. I remember her last name. Just gorgeous, right? So she's kind of with me the whole time, the seminarian, me. I wasn't doing real well on the celibacy. You're beginning to see, okay. So she's with me the whole time. And then there's Bob and John. Now, John who later became the lead. You see, there's a whole pattern to this. John actually became the lead guitar player when I was doing the talk, all that. Later, John gave up. Get this guy was brilliant. He gave up a full ride to Purdue for aeronautical engineering and basketball. So John was really smart, right? And we were the whole first semester in this. Why am I telling this publicly? This is fucking crazy. Anyway,
keep going.
Okay, so get this. So John and I were like the whole first semester at St. Meinrad. John hated me. He thought I was the most arrogant, egotistical guy he'd ever met, right? I wasn't arrogant, I was confident. Okay. And a lot of times I had reasons for being confident. But a lot of times people, it's like grandeur versus grandiosity. People mistake that. Anyway, by the second semester, we can't, just like you and me, we can't be separated. We're buddies. So, I would get money, back him. He'd go win money in poker games. This is in the seminary. This is not out on the, he'd get it. We go to Louisville, go to dances. It was kind of wild, right? Celibacy wasn't happening very well. So now we're in Oregon. Now, you got to picture it. We're in a car. Sandy's cuddling next to me. She just cuddled a lot. I loved it. So she's next to me. And of course, that made Bob even more looking at me like, how'd he get her? She's not making any problems. Gorgeous, model, cuddling. I didn't say much. So that even made it more fascinating in Bob's eye. Joe's laughing most of the time at this whole thing. And so I canvassed for Bobby Kennedy one day and said, this is for the birds. I'm not going to go door to door and try to get this guy elected. What the hell? I got better things to do. I have to get dates for 21 seminarians. How did I do that, Sam? You might suspect. Telephone operators. So I got on, instead of going out and canvassing for Kennedy, I spent the whole day getting blind dates for seminarians so we can avoid the child molestation future, and I'm like decades ahead of it. I'm trying to stem off the sexual abuse thing that Spotlight did with the Boston Globe in advance. I'm doing my part, Sam. I'm doing my part. And I'm succeeding. I've got 21 guys' dates every night. That's what I'm not working for Bobby. He's funding the whole operation, but I'm not doing any okay. I should not be admitting this, but I am.
Just when I thought that you were a pioneer, you just took it to an entirely different level. That should be a movie. What you just
I'm telling you, man, this is pre-Spotlight. You saw it, I hope you saw it. Anyway, I'm trying to head off the sex abuse hysteria like in 1968. 30 years ahead? So I was ahead then. So anyway, this is, I'll tell you the rest. This is classic. So we're at the beach, and Sandy's with me the whole time. We're at the beach, or I'm in there getting the dates, and we're not doing anything for Bobby. Nothing. And I'm not proud of that. In a way it was unethical and, it wasn't too cool, but I don't think I was doing too much harm, but I sure as hell wasn't earning my keep. Okay. So yeah, this is true. Get this. So I'm getting the dates. And Bob, and we were drinking, not to get drunk, but just the buzz. And I would do my rap thing, which I do some of that. And of course, Bob is just kind of idolizing me at this point. So at one point he goes, Joe, stop the car. He said, Jim, and I would give him commands. It was hilarious, but we had it on a command obedience thing. And we were drinking. It was just fun to do it. I'd say, go tell her this. And then the girl would go out with him, go say. So we turned it into this command obedience thing. So he said, Joe, stop the car. And we're kind of a little bit buzzed. And Joe said, why am I stopped? He said, because I'm going to go jump off a bridge if Jim tells me to do it. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. We're not about bridge jumping. That's not where we're coming from. That's not what this is about. But, we did stop the car and have some fun with it. Hold on. I think that's Jane. Let me just tell her. Hold on. Let me just tell her.
Tell her hello.
Yeah, I'll tell her. I'm on. I got to talk on the Sam Deaver podcast. I got to take a second, right? Just
Yeah.
really blow her mind. The Sam.
Yeah, we've talked about it on this, so that's perfect timing.
Yeah. Hold on, Deaver podcast. Okay, and then I'll just tell her I'll call it. I'll text you back. I'll text you back. Okay. Anyway, so this is almost over, but it's check this out. You back. Okay. So now I'm sitting in the office. There's a little pause in the action. He didn't jump. I said, I'm ordering you not to jump, not to jump. So Bob didn't jump. Now, fast forward a few days, I'm sitting in the office and my feet are up on the table and I'm getting the usual daily 21 blind dates with telephone operators. And in come these mafia looking guys, Jim and Bill, pinky rings. They just looked the part. I mean, there's no doubt that they were these Italian enforcer type guys. And they walk in and they're there just to see if there's any screw ups like me taking advantage of the system. That's why they're there. Okay. And they walk in and they go, and you know, my feet are up on the desk. I'm on the phone. I should be out there canvassing for Kennedy. I'm not doing any of that, but I'm pretty quick. And I realized right away that I could read what's going on. And John was in the back, probably nursing a hangover. I said, John, follow my lead. So I'm going to improvise this. And so they walk in. I said, now this is for your entertainment, Sam, especially you. In our vast growing audience. Get this. I went. So I said, who are you guys? Okay, we're the campaign. You don't need to know too much about us, but you know, what are you doing? They're saying. I said, man, this is pretty true. I said, man, am I glad to see you guys. This is Jim and Bill. I mean, I said, man, am I glad to see you guys. I said, well, and they're looking at me like, pardon me. I said, this campaign's all screwed up. The whole campaign in Oregon is a mess. I've been trying to figure out how to fix this thing, and I haven't, I'm working on it. I mean, this is all bullshit, okay. And I said, but here you guys are. I said, am I ever glad to see you? Right. And I said, look, if you guys got a minute, now, of course they got a minute. They're there to find out these guys like me. Of course they got, I said, you got a minute? They said, yeah. I said, can you make a little time? Could we just go out and get a bite to eat or something, go to a bar or something? I got to run these ideas by you. Now, meanwhile, I know now, Sam, this is important. I know nothing about politics, nothing. So now I got to go from 0 to 60 at Ferrari speed and I got to make up shit. I needed time. So John goes with us. We go to a bar. They had a car. We go in there. Now I used Vito, my dad's old trick. What he used to do is as soon as you get into the bar, he'd find a placemat and he had a gold cross pen and he'd just start figuring everything out on that placemat, right? So we're sitting down with Jim and Bill, and I'm not going to say seemed to be like, I don't think they were like Rhodes Scholars. Let's just be mild about it, okay? But I liked them. They were listening. I got their attention. I started diagramming and improvising. This is all true. There's no exaggeration. A complete campaign strategy from nothing because I knew nothing. So I came up with, I used whatever social, psychological stuff. And I said, now, what I want you now, of course, they completely forgot about what we were doing. I said, now here's what I want you to do. I fold up the placemat. I gave it to Bill. I think I might have even put it in his suit coat pocket. And I said, listen, man, is there any way you can get this to Bobby Kennedy's campaign manager in LA as soon as possible? And by this time they'd bought it completely. And he said, yeah, like they're working for me at this point, right? John's just trying to keep a straight face. And so now it gets kind of tragic, but get this. They go to LA, we don't get busted at all. We end up, then the very next thing is we go to LA. I had my dad's $200 corduroy handmade suit coat jacket. It had matching pants, but I'm in LA. A corduroy jacket, hotter than hell, right? That's all I had. We get to LA, and I start the whole getting the dates, top priority. I'm trying to head off the sex abuse scandal like 40 years, in the future. And I get John's dates just because it's easier for me. So I get him a date, I get me a date. Now, okay, now those first dates didn't work out too good. I got John one of the most gorgeous looking women I've ever seen, and and we're in a Volkswagen. Now the girls are. This is just an aside. I shouldn't be saying this, but I am. So my date is driving the Volkswagen. He's sitting behind the driver's seat, and one of the most gorgeous women I've ever seen is sitting next to him. The date I got him. I didn't get her for me. I got him for John. And he's nervous. He can't even be around her. She's so knock up. And he's my best friend, but I can't take my eyes off her. So I'm turning around all the time. I'm not going to really do much, but I just want to look at her, right? And my date picks up on that I'm, like more interested in his date, and they dump us. Fast forward now, we're in the Ambassador Hotel in LA, which I think just got demolished, but anyway, we're in the Ambassador Hotel. Kennedy's dude, I'm going to bring you right up to speed. Chuck White, remember him, who got us there to begin with, came up to me and said, this is no bull. He said, man, I don't know what you did in Oregon. And I thought he was going to say, you've ruined it for all people in the future, right? He said, I don't know what you pulled in Oregon. And I'm waiting for the shoe to, drop. And I said, okay, whatever. He said, but Bobby Kennedy loved your campaign ideas. And I'm going, now I'm not completely shocked because I think I'm pretty sharp. But anyway, I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, not only that, he wants to hire you, me, and John to be advance men after the LA, after he wins here. And he said he's going to fly us to Virginia. He's got a home there. He wants to meet personally with us. I met him that same day, real briefly. He didn't know it was me, I don't think. I just shook his hand and moved on. I just called my parents back in Michigan and said, I'm dropping out of the seminary. I'm going to go work for Kennedy. I got to go. They're not expecting me to make it in the monastery anyway. Everything's going according to schedule. Now I'm going to work for Kennedy. God knows where that would have went. But anyway. So now, fast forward, we're sitting in a bar called The Cave in the Ambassador Hotel. I've gotten 2 more dates, backup dates, plan B dates. And this one girl is arguing with me about politics, which I still know nothing about some guy named Rafferty who's running, and he's conservative, and I'm trying. And she goes to the bathroom and comes out and said, Bobby Kennedy's been shot. And I said, that's not funny. You don't kid about that. I said, how would you know that? She said, well, I went to the bathroom and it's near the kitchen and the people in the kitchen are talking about it. He's supposed to come through the kitchen. And they said he's been shot. And I said, you're not kidding. So John and I leave the cave. Now, the main ballroom, we're supposed to be there listening to his speech, but we're not. We're in the cave drinking gin and tonics with our new girlfriends. But now we leave and we go to the very back of the ballroom, and that's what, we saw it was real. I mean, women were fainting, men were picking them up, some of them just above, trying to carry them out. It was pandemonium. And this is the end of it, but there's a really cool ending. I just want to go a little bit longer in this. Get this. So the next thing I remember, I was asleep in the lobby of the Ambassador Hotel with my feet up on the coffee table, and some FBI guy kicked my feet off the table. That's how I woke up. And he said, who are you? And I showed him ID, and he said, well, there's a chartered plane for you and your group leaving. We're going to get you on that plane. I said, with all due respect, man, I just got hired by this guy. Do you mind if we, can we just slow it down a little bit? I want to see if he lives or dies. I mean, this is a life-changing thing. It was sad. It was a lot of stuff. I cried earlier in the night when I realized he'd really been shot. I'd certainly sobered up about all this, but I wanted to know what was going to happen. So he said, well, unless you know somebody in this hotel, you got to go with me. And I said, well, I kind of do. I called them the Berkeley cheerleaders. Now, I think they were traveling with the campaign. They seemed like college-aged girls, a group of them, which is really ironic because Terry, my wife, got a master's from Berkeley. So, this all kind of fits together. I called them the Berkeley cheerleaders for God knows what reason, but they seem to be like groupies. Okay. And I met them, and they gave me their room number, and they said, well, we'll see you later. You know, in case the second group of dates didn't work out, I had a plan C. I said, well, yeah, I happen to know these girls. I go up. I'm the only guy. I go in. There's like 10 cheerleaders, you know, level. And I made a mistake. He was cool enough to take me up there. I immediately ordered room service. Now, I'm not saying that was a smart move because I wasn't staying there. But he followed up with me and he said, you're leaving. I said, I'll tell you what. So on the way out, this is the end of it. On the way out, I said, look, man, this is for real. He really hired me. Will you just take me to the hospital where he is? And he did. And I can't tell you the name of it. I don't know where Bobby Kennedy was at a hospital after he'd been shot. But I was there standing outside the emergency room with 2 or 3 other people when he died. Or, you know, I don't know exactly when he's pronounced dead, but I was there. And then it was kind of a blur. I got on a plane, got back to Michigan. And here's the final thing. Get this. Remember, I didn't really do anything for Kennedy. You know, I'm not proud of that, but I was, let's just say I was just a kid trying to, you know, whatever. Get this. The FBI checked me out later. And then about 3 or 4 months after that he died and everything, I literally got a picture of Bobby mailed to me by Ethel Kennedy. And it said, get this, dear Jim, thank you for everything. Love, Ethel. I was flabbergasted. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I never met her. The only thing I can guess is that he must have said something to her about me because, and I don't know who else got him. We weren't in touch. I wasn't in touch. But I lost that picture with some old girlfriend somewhere in a trunk. I don't know where it is. But literally, dear Jim, thank you for everything. Love, Ethel. A picture of Bobby. And she wrote it. It was all in her handwriting. I couldn't believe it. That, talk about a class family. I mean, you know, that was how classy they were. And that was just one phase. I got a million of them, but man, is that a story? That's a good one, isn't it?
That is one of the best stories I have ever heard. I have so many questions and things I want to spiderweb off of that.
Part 2, we'll do a part 2.
Yeah, so real quick. So basically, you were there the night he was shot.
Yeah.
You
I was
there.
at a bar called The Cave.
Wow.
And he was shot in the main ballroom of the Ambassador Hotel in LA, which I think now has been demolished, but that was what it was. It was the famous Ambassador. I was in The Cave, a bar called The Cave, when he was shot.
And I have so much to say. I thank you for your service too of preventing, you know,
Trying to prevent
certain
sex abuse scandal.
Sex abuse, which these are gonna have to be a lot more. Wow, that's incredible.
You weren't expecting.
I have so many questions for you after this podcast. We have a lot of conversations ahead of us.
Yeah, we do, man.
Yeah.
And you know, even one more thing. I don't know where we are in this, but anyhow, let me just say this, okay? Let me say one other thing. And this is the very, very, very most transcendent, best level of information I want to share. You know, and if we stop podcasting in 5 minutes or 3 minutes, I want to get this in because I want to build on this. I spent my deepest work wasn't in psychology or music or writing or whatever. From the very beginning, it's been in the spiritual stuff. And when I heard your podcast and that girl was on there, will you pronounce her name for me?
Kalila Yasmin.
Kalila. And I noticed that you'd mentioned something about studying the spiritual stuff, and she sounded pretty good, and she was insightful about that topic. Then you were sharing books and experiences. That's my most important work, and I want to talk with you about that personally, whatever. Because I mean, I literally spent my life. That's the deeper stuff. And I got some stuff to share with you there. I shared a little bit when we talked on the phone, but I've got some other stuff. And one thing you could do, and this is a plug for it. I don't know if you heard of the Urantia book.
It's called the Urantia book?
Yeah, it's spelled. You might want to jot this down. It's Urantia book. The Urantia book. Okay. It is the most profound, and I could walk into. I mean, this is how confident I am with this. and I'm not, I could walk into Harvard, Yale, anywhere in the world, I don't care who's there or who's coming or who's been there, and do a dissertation without any preparation on why that book is the most profound collection of writings in any language on this planet right now. Period. There's nothing. And I'm talking about Einstein, I'm talking about Goethe, I'm talking about Nietzsche, I'm talking about Lao Tse, Buddha, I'm talking about the pre-Socratic philosophers, Heraclitus. I don't care who they are. Name anybody in the world, any of the most brilliant minds in the world. Nothing touches this book and the information in there. Okay, it's spelled Urantia book. It was written in 1935. It was a channeled book, which is very interesting. Okay. But you can look it up. It's sold worldwide, but it's never been advertised. It's always been word of mouth. Okay, that's the foundation for my life's work in the spiritual sense. And I want to tell you more about that later. But I want to mention that to you because if you're really interested in, well, let me just say one thing about it. There's a lot more behind this, but I'll say this: the third part of the Urantia book is a channeled, I don't like the word channel, but we can't avoid it. You know, it's a revelation, a revealed document of Christ's life is the third part of the book. And it is the most profound. I mean, the whole thing is this level. Starts with God, ends with Christ, and everybody in between. But that third part about Christ's life, I mean, you're talking about parts of years of his life that weren't even included in the Bible. They didn't even mention, they didn't even know about it. I mean, it's way beyond the Bible. And I'm not putting the Bible down. It's just the Bible is here and the Urantia book is here. It's the most profound writing on a spiritual level in existence. So I just wanted to plug that because you and I personally are going to be revisiting that topic because, man, you deserve the best. And I've spent, to give you a feel for it, it's about the only thing I even read, sitting right over there. I got it when I was about 22, and it was so profound. It was odd how I got it. If we got a minute or two, I'll tell you. And
we got about 5 minutes, and I'm telling you, you just like my whole book session up here. That's all spiritual books up there that way.
Man,
you and I have so much to talk about. Like we.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you. Listen, even the way I got it was mysterious. Get this. This is. I'll do it in under 5 minutes, but this is how mysterious this is. Okay. When I left the monastery, I didn't go into the monastery to be a cut up. I didn't go there to like not do celibacy. I didn't go in there to drink or really like, try to head off the sex abuse scandal. Those were all, or record, I recorded Lonely by John Sebastian. And, those were all side things. I went in there to see if I could serve, I wanted to see if I could become a priest and serve like Father Bill did, work with the poor. And so my going in, I didn't know if I could do that. But when I left, I had a very unquenchable yearning for, I knew that they didn't have the answer in terms of Christ. I knew that. I knew Christ was the most profound. I knew that. When I left, I was very, very hardened, but I picked up and kept studying on my own the rest of my life. So during the rock phase, between playing Jethro Tull stuff and whatever, my brother, who's a very bright guy, ran into a high school friend, and I'll wrap this up quick. Friend said, I got this book and I can't comprehend it. It's way beyond me. And my brother Tom said, well, I'll take it. And my brother Tom gave him a guitar in exchange for it. John, the guy from the monastery, read it. His dad read it. Tom, I think, read it. And I had this whole, I would say, metaphysical, mystical experience with God all along. I haven't even gotten into that. But it spooked me because it was, I may have read one or two sentences. I thought, because I now know why, but I ran from the book for probably 5 or 10 years, and it keep coming back. And when my daughter, my daughter's mom was pregnant with her, I got time to read it, and I finished in tears. I was sobbing when I read it. The crucifixion is included, just to give you a little. That one. You won't believe this thing. I mean, you will believe it, but it's the most. Anyway, it's as profound as I said. But anyway, and then get this. So I read the book, and we leave. We're living in Michigan, and we leave. We're broke, whatever. And she said to me, my daughter's mom, I said, you know anywhere warm? I'm working construction. I'm writing, and I'm working. I'm doing all kinds of stuff. But now I got a kid. She said, well, I have an old boyfriend in Santa Cruz. We can stay with him. I said, okay, let's go there. So we drive there. They build a loft for us. These are these great big hunking guys. That one was her ex-boyfriend. And we're living there. They built a loft for us. It was great. So we got this little baby. We're living in the loft. And I finished the book in tears. I thought my whole life it's going to change my life completely. And I don't know exactly what to do with it. And she gets me a Valentine's Day gift where she buys me a massage in Santa Cruz, way out in the middle of the woods. Get this, at a monastery, an old converted monastery in the woods in Santa Cruz. And I'm on the table getting a massage from this girl named Christy, which was cool. It was Candace had got me this. And I said, well, what do you do? This is an old monastery? Yeah. I said, what do you do besides do massages? She said, well, we have a Urantia study group there. And so that, all I'm saying is, man, to be continued, but I'm going to tell you right now, you won't believe where this is headed, with not only with you and me, but I've spent, decades with this. Nothing else touches. I don't read anything else. I mean, I don't care what it is, it doesn't matter. It's boring compared to this. This is beyond. So to be continued. I don't want to get into much more of it if we do another whatever, but you are in for a treat. If I have to buy it for you, whatever, doesn't matter. You got to get the book.
I'm ordering it tonight after I've already pulled it up on my Amazon.
Oh man. I mean, it is way beyond anything. And it's a catalyst for what I'm really about later. Okay. Which, before I came into this podcast with you, I didn't know how much of, if any of that I would touch, but my real goal, I do kind of have a mission now, and it has nothing to do with the current business. We didn't even touch that or any of that, but to be continued, man. Jim.
Yeah. I don't want us to lose this because we're running out of time, but you're coming on again soon. We're doing this again soon. Okay, there's so much we didn't cover. Mm-hmm. Quick shout out where people can find you.
Oh, nosliphairties.com, and on LinkedIn, let me just tell Jane what's going on. Oh, so, LinkedIn, nosliphairties.com. They can email me at info@nosliphairties. I mean, that's just a product we've got for sale. And we can talk about that sometime if you want or not. But
yeah, no, definitely. I wanted to get into that deeply, but I think we've got a nice start here, and
we got a nice start.
Well, Jim, it's a pleasure. Again, very grateful for you. This is actually just mind blowing. The fact that you just told me about this book on this podcast, where I do a book of the episode, I read tons of books, I'm deep into spirituality, which I need to tell you about my own journey, and the fact that you just told me about this, everything happened. I just confident this is all divine intervention.
I think so. Listen, man, truer words have not been at this level. Trust me, you are in for the treat of your life, man. I mean, I stand by that. Yeah. So we'll continue personally, whatever you want to do, man. Let's just continue.
Yeah. All right, Jim. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for everything. And we're going to talk again soon.
Okay, man. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.